This is the Educational Triage Podcast. There has to be something that we can do in order to help teachers mend their torn psyches. Because some of them, and I'm not talking about patchwork quilt, I'm talking about figuring out a way to actually heal them.
Mhm.
Because nobody thinks that they're broken. Because teachers are very good about being professional and not bringing their outside life into the classroom. Welcome. We invite you to come along with us on an exploration of interviews, issues, and other exciting and relevant topics in education, especially alternative education. They say alternative education is a laboratory for mainstream education. Why? Well, join us every week and listen in as Christy Goodell,
Hello.
Philip Summers,
Aloha.
and I, Tony Hunt, jump in feet first to discuss issues that may affect our classes, students, communities, as well as our teaching. Please subscribe if you enjoy and find relevance in what you experience here. And if you haven't left a quick review, please do. We appreciate your candor and insights so we can improve as we move forward. Now, let's see what's on board today. And welcome back to Educational Triage, where I am joined by the sensational Philip Summers
Aloha.
and the glimmering Christy Goodell.
Hello.
That wasn't a PBS voice, as you promised from the
Sorry.
last week.
Hello.
There
How
we
are
are.
you? Yes. Sorry. We'll work on that. Hello.
Anyway, so a couple of weeks ago, we did the show on Educator Burnout, and we decided that we really didn't hit everything that we really needed to, and that it was a much broader topic and things that we can do in order to help resolve some of these situations or some of what is creating the burnout in educators. And by educator, I mean anybody who works with the students in the school. That includes administration, teachers, support staff. So let's go down the new lines of what we're looking at. Let's start. Well, it began pre-pandemic, but
Oh, yeah.
let's just use the pandemic as a springboard in a sense, because teachers were already feeling as though they were being asked to do an incredible amount, more and more and more. And my first question to you, and this is pre-pandemic, do you think, because we talked about how education works with students and puts them into some sort of a compliant nature where we're asking students to comply rather than it's about compliance, it's about falling into line and doing what they need to do. Do you think that the same thing is being done to educators for them to comply?
Yes.
So that
Oh, sorry. Keep going.
because we have the standardized testing and it seems as though everything is being chipped away to make everybody into this mold.
This is waiting. Yes. Yes.
I was thinking
So
that myself.
teachers absolutely are
actually.
being,
Yeah.
teachers are being asked to comply in various categories for sure.
Well, there's just a general loss of autonomy. It's for example, when I started to teach, I remember something that impressed me greatly when I was in grad school. There was a group of us over at we were at the International Studies Magnet in the Portland Public School District where I was going, and there was a group of us. I was doing that because I was studying Black studies and kind of a general studies that way. It was sort of social studies with an international look on it, and I was studying African history, and this one guy was retiring, and he had a whole file drawer full of economics curriculum, and it was all derived from research and lesson plans that he had derived, over the years. He had created and lessons that he had taught and refined, and he had said to the interns, "You're welcome to it." And I wasn't particularly interested because econ wasn't my shtick, but I remember it
Uh-huh.
feeling really valuable. Like, oh my goodness, really? Curriculum just ready made. And it wasn't a textbook, and textbooks weren't what we wanted. We wanted that stuff. We wanted primary sources or secondary sources, things like that, newspaper clippings and created curriculum. And that was autonomy. And over the years I did that too. But we lost the ability to teach that way. And that's what kind of happened. And you said that more duties came and we lost the ability to teach, really.
Yeah, I listen to a lot of teachers who talk about how they're now dictated to read from a script
Yeah.
because you have all these programs. Now, I taught Read 180, and they want you to read from a script in Read 180.
Mm-hmm.
Now, kids the kids that are in Read 180 tend to be the ones who are potentially not going to listen to you, and they're the ones who already have problems in the classroom by the time they get there for one reason or another. And you have to read this to them. And as you're reading it to them, they're not taking it seriously.
Right.
Mm-mm.
And so you're cautioned not to put it into your own words. Well, I did. I put it into my own words. And I said, okay, I'm going to read part of this and then we're going to extrapolate. We're going to continue to go through to make sure that we're all on the same page.
Right.
And to an extent, I think they appreciated that. But they're asking teachers to do this in science. They're asking them to do this in English. They're asking
No.
them to do this in social studies and all kinds of classes now because this is prescribed teaching.
Right.
So rather than take the idea that because teachers are feeling demoralized because they have this huge bank of education built up,
Mm-hmm.
and many of them have all this experience as
Mm-hmm.
well, they're being told by legislatures, by school boards who have never really set foot in a classroom aside
Yeah.
from maybe going to parent teacher conferences since they were last in school,
Or going
telling
to the
you what
school. Yeah. Just
yeah,
going to
telling
school.
you what and how you're going to do your job. Tell me how many other professions have this?
Yeah, I'm trying to think, like maybe in medicine, but that's probably more procedural and like safeguards, right?
No, it's not. Actually, I know of some doctors who are facing the same thing. It's the insurance companies that tell them they can't do things.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
it's exactly the
Okay, so
same
that's a good
thing.
example.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
They want to prescribe
And then
something to a patient, and the insurance company says, no, we're not going to fund that. You can't do that. Well, you could, but they have to pay for it themselves, and so they won't do it. Well,
that's
yeah.
true. And then it's kind of the same comparison where like people who are in insurance are probably not doctors and they're making medical decisions.
Exactly.
Kind of
They're
the
making
same
economic
kind of the same
decisions.
Right.
parallel.
Yeah.
People on either school
Mm-hmm.
boards or in the community or in district office are making decisions for teachers, and many of them
Correct.
have not been in the
Yeah.
classroom. Yeah. Yep.
They're facing the same thing, actually, in some cases, political decisions. You're right, Tony. I think that there's a lot of political decisions being made about curriculum being taught in schools. In the famous CRT
And
thing, my
economic.
famous thing, they're not teaching CRT because that's really,
Right.
really advanced and boring.
Right. But I think that's a
Yeah.
big push by the media to get that going and get
Exactly.
everybody
It's just
get their haunches on
horrendous.
fire.
But the people show up at the school
So
boards going,
let's
hey, my kids aren't going to learn that. It's like, no, they're not. They're not being taught that either. So,
right,
yeah.
right. But
Right.
that's a false rabbit hole that we don't need to really go down, I don't think, right
Oh, we
now.
don't have to at all, but it's
Um,
just my example of how it's being fed that way.
right.
And
Oh, definitely.
and so anything
Definitely.
sort of
So
any kind of connotation toward that becomes that. And it's like, no, 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 no. Yeah.
I think
So
Unfortunately
the
true.
step back about what you said, Philip, about with the parent input, I
Yeah.
feel that has shifted
Yeah.
over the years,
mhm.
pre and
Yes.
post COVID, where it used to be kids would go to school and parents are like, okay, I know you're going to do your best and you're going to teach them, and you're the expert on the education. And I feel it's shifted to where parents and especially in some parts of the country where like they get to approve your curriculum and what is or isn't taught, which just kind of goes against the philosophy of public education where you're teaching to the public.
I'm
And
going to say
that seems to have changed.
it's louder than it has been in the past.
Mm-hmm.
I've had parents come in to tell me what I could and couldn't teach in the past. And we're talking, oh my goodness, 30 some odd years ago.
Mm-hmm.
So I remember
But did they
teaching.
come and tell you what to teach the whole class, or were they just concerned about like, hey, I'm really concerned about this topic with my child,
They were concerned about a topic
with their child?
for all the children.
Oh, okay. Because that's the
All
big
the
push where they want to dictate what is being taught to everybody. And it's like all parent, like as a whole. And, you know, you definitely want parent involvement. Like that's a big deal. I'm certainly not saying boo parents as a parent
Mhm.
myself, but I feel there's a huge difference from being involved and participatory and collaborative versus me and a bunch of my parent friends are going to tell you teachers what you can and can't teach. That is different, and
But that was
feels
still
a different
happening
shift.
beforehand.
You think to this degree, or
I
is it
do.
just getting more publication and more
I think
media
it's getting
attention?
a lot more voice.
Okay.
But because the media is picking up on it, and so more parents are getting involved. I think a
Yeah.
lot of parents started paying attention maybe a little bit more. But you know, but why are parents doing that? Maybe it has something to do with the fact that parents are having fewer and fewer children, and so if you only have one or two kids, you're going to pay attention to what's going on with those kids because those are your little futures. Those are the ones that may or may not put you into a nursing home.
Yeah.
Those are the ones who are going to make sure that you're fed and that your diapers are changed,
Right.
and that you have a place to be. But they're also, you have a lot invested in those little nuggets, right?
Yeah.
So you want to make sure that parents became very controlling. And so helicopter parents are becoming more and more, especially with social media. And social media, there's a lack of self-awareness, I think, among parents about what they're actually doing when they jump in. And I have talked to parents about this, and I was asked at a party, I think maybe I brought this up at one point, where a friend of mine was throwing a party and she came up to me and she said, my friends want to talk to you. And I said, why? And she said, because you'll tell them the truth and they want to hear the truth. And I said, okay. And I said, what about what? And she said, they want to know about helicopter parenting. And
How to do it? I'm just kidding.
And I looked at them and I said, are you helicopter parents? And they said, well, we may be. And I said, then you don't want to talk to me because you will not want to talk to me for the rest of the evening. They said, that's not true. And I said, okay, I warned you.
You've been warned.
And yes. I looked at, they've been warned. I said, first of all, why are you so insecure that you need to control somebody else?
Mm-hmm.
Secondly, why do you have so little respect for your child that you cannot allow your child to fail and learn? Why must you make sure that your child becomes so fragile that anything that happens that you don't like or that might make them cry, which may actually help them build character, is a bad thing for them? Why do you have so little respect for the people that you entrust your children with that you are always going to second guess them?
Mm-hmm.
What's going on with that? How do you expect your child to survive, to grow, and to become a full human person if you don't allow them the space and the time and the abilities to fail without intervening? Are you going to be there? Are you going to embarrass them when you show up at their job? Are you going to walk in on their college class because you don't like the grade that the professor gave them on a paper? What are you doing? Are you going to do some of their work? Are you going to move with them there? I said, this is overindulgence. And I said, and nothing comes from overindulgence that is good. I
Right.
said, and I've had my say. And they looked at me and they turned their backs on me and walked away and refused to speak to me for the rest of the evening.
Oh
As
boy.
predicted.
Dun dun dun. Yeah. You knew it was coming.
So I think and I believe that that's pretty much what's happening. Parents don't want their kids to be suffering. And think about it too. Back when I was growing up, we didn't
Mm-hmm.
have cell phones. Television was relatively new. Well, it wasn't that new, it was there,
And it was all
but
silent, right? Like sound hadn't been created when you were. No, I'm just kidding. No.
no. Um,
Figures.
we didn't have color television. Color television was brand spanking new. And we didn't, I remember we got our first color television. I want to say it was in 1969, 1970, way past everybody else because we used to buy used TVs because we didn't have tons of money. And they kept blowing up. And then my parents finally said, look, let's just get a brand new one because after having all these other televisions, it might be worth it.
Right.
So we did. And of course, within a week, the tube blew.
Oh,
And
jeez.
so they had to get that replaced. But it was still, my parents had that television for eons. Um, but we didn't have cell phones. We didn't have this instant connection where I had one parent who demanded that she have access to her son while he was in classes because she feared for his life because people were being dangerous. And I said, your son is the pot stirrer. He's the one that's sending out all this stuff. And she said, no, he's not. They're all after him.
Okay.
And
Oh
where's
boy.
that kid? And so she coddled that kid. And where's the kid now? The kid is serving life in prison for murder.
Oh.
And the, I keep meeting these parents who go behind their spouses' backs, and they do all these weird little things with their kids and let their kids get away with things.
Oh, yikes.
And even I have good friends who've had divorces because of this.
And it's all
Um,
under the guise of they feel that they are, it's that they feel they're helping and being supportive. And it's such a fine line between supporting your, teaching your children and guiding them versus
right.
like, I'm doing it for you. It's that philosophy. Like if you give a person a fish, they can eat for a day, but if you teach them how, right.
Yeah.
And so if I give them the fish and then cut it up and feed it to them, like that's, you're
If I
going too far.
digest the fish for them.
Yes.
Yeah,
Oh,
if I chew it up like a baby bird and spit it in your mouth.
like
Yeah,
a
and so
bird, regurgitated
Yeah.
back for them.
Maybe that's the new
yeah,
thing.
and it is really
Uh,
hard. And I know myself that I'm sure I have done not like full helicoptering, but it's
Well, I
it's
think it's
hard. It's so hard. I totally get it when you see your kids struggling. No one likes to see their kids in pain and struggling, but they also need to fail so they can figure out what did you learn from this? Yes, you didn't get a good grade on that paper. Do you go and yell at the teacher, or do you like, maybe I should have turned it in on time? Maybe I should have started sooner. Maybe I should go in for after school help. We have those kids all the time who are like, I did poorly on this test. I'm not going to do well. I'm like, okay, tell me what you do outside of class. They're like, well, nothing. Like, oh, okay.
Mhm.
That's going to be super hard to do any better if you're only developing in 90 minutes, right? Like you got to do
Right.
something more. And then here come the emails. Like, can you, yeah. Oh,
Mhm.
I know it's so hard. It's
Suck
so
it up,
hard.
kid.
And we have parents who won't support us when we need to take the phones away from the kids because the kids need that screen time because they're so addicted. I took a
Yeah.
phone away from a student. We had an agreement. I took the phone away. The kid was a sloppy mess within 5 minutes and couldn't cope. Needed to have that phone.
Mhm.
And so finally walked them down to their counselor and said, you deal with this. And no, I did not bring the phone with me because that's going to go to the front office. And the parent was furious. But it's this codependency that people have started having. And we're supposed to deal with that in the classroom.
And that comes back full circle to our topic where if you it's hard when you have to parent or teach not just the student but the whole family. Like it should just be I'm teaching and
Hmm.
educating the student. But when you have a lot of the family dynamics, and some of them, you need to be in there and help be a parent to these students because they don't have anyone else, right? Like we have all these stories. So what I was saying is that it's sometimes what leads to burnout is the amount of work teachers have to do with not just all their students, but with all the parents, and not just like supportive ones, but um, just I think with email, like I think, and I'm guilty of this too, right? I email teachers and then you expect them to, why aren't they answering me right away? And then if every student's parents or a third of your class do that, it's a lot of communication and they're contacting you all the time. And, they have instant access to grades and why haven't you done
Hmm.
this? And it's constant. And so I think that constant need to be accessible and you're teaching and you're working all the time is really hard.
Definitely. Definitely. It's almost as though the parents are your clients as well as the kids.
Yeah. Yes.
And I remember when I was doing strategic tutoring, and I called it more academic therapy. And so I worked with some of the parents. I had one parent who was a terrible helicopter parent, and I weaned her off of it. Things were going really well. Fortunately, this parent was teachable, but they needed to have consistent training. But even that, I mean, just having that constant,
Yeah.
it's really wearing
Yes.
after a while.
Yeah.
Yeah, it wears
So,
you
but
out.
you have the parent, right. But you have the parents who want their kids constantly connected. You have the parents who say it's your problem, not theirs. They're totally unsupportive. And you need
Of
their
course.
support.
Yes.
And
Yes.
it's wonderful when you have parents who are supportive. I had one parent who was
It's definitely
fantastic.
cultural. Sorry to interrupt, but it's definitely cultural, which I have had to learn where some some of our students family and their background and their culture is that the school does, when they're at school, that's you, and
Hmm.
the parents are not involved and they're not trying to be distant or not in contact and not participatory, but that's just their background and that's how
Hmm.
they work with the schools and
With
that's
the
Hmm.
their
and the schools.
And, and that's when you start working with the cultural liaisons,
Yeah,
either in your
there's sort of
school
yeah,
or outside, because that makes a huge difference.
yeah.
But I did have this one student that I was having problems with, and finally I decided I was just going to call mom. And so we had conferences, and I saw this woman, and she looked not very happy. And I said, "Excuse me, are you X's mother?" And she said, "Are you Hunt?" And I said, "I am." She said, "Okay." And she sat down, and I thought, "Oh my gosh, I am in so much trouble. I can just feel it right now." She said, "I am a very angry Black woman, and I am not afraid to go to jail. My husband has the bail money." And I said, "Okay, I'm all ears. What's going on?" She said, "What is my son not doing?" And so we had a great chat. She said, "This will change."
I really appreciated what that parent said. what
Hmm.
what is my son not doing or what is my son doing, as opposed to like, you're not helping my kid or what can I do to help, right? Like they
Hmm.
put the responsibility on the student, which I really appreciate, because that's super hard when they're like, what are you going to do to get my kid to pass or get him or her, right? So I really appreciate that parent recognizing that the student is a part of it, and it's even better when they bring the kid in, right?
It's
Yeah.
right. And it's because they want to make it, they're process oriented. And the parents that we're talking about who are the issue are the end result oriented.
Hmm.
So
Yeah,
what?
yeah, that's
My
true.
kid's still going to graduate. No, your kid's not going to graduate unless they get these things done. Well,
Hmm.
why aren't they getting them done? I even had a parent come in to me to demand why their child was not doing their homework.
You mean the
Yeah,
work you
I've
do at
had
home?
that.
What about
Why is
that?
my child not graduating? Well, have you asked your child?
Right. Yeah.
Exactly. Why would I ask him? You're the teacher.
Yes,
Okay,
yes, that's
I've
true.
already graduated high
Don't you know
school. Just going to
why?
throw that out there.
Well, I've asked him, but he's
Yeah.
not giving me any answers. That's the
And the
problem.
child and I don't understand why my kid has to be here. Well, let's ask the kid. Why aren't you doing your homework? Because I don't want to. And the parent looks at you and says, "What? Well, what's going on here? Why doesn't he want to do his homework? You live with him. I see him for X amount of time during the day. You have them for A, B, C, D, E, F, G, all the way down to X amount of time during the
Right.
day.
Right.
Y
Can't you
and Z
make
is
him do his
sleep time.
homework?
Right.
Yes, we
Right.
can.
That is out
But
of my
no, we
hands.
can't. Yes, I
Right.
love that. No, not really
So,
can. Yeah, I can give him an F, but I don't like doing that. That's why we're talking
okay.
today.
So
Yes.
then we go into the pandemic, and teachers now shift everything into their, and I'm going to use air quotes, home office.
Mm-hmm.
Oh
So
yeah.
now teachers cannot escape. They can't come home and
Mm-mm.
just let things go, because now they have everything at their home.
Right.
And there are some teachers who were able to still go back into the classroom and teach in the classroom. But for many, it was really difficult because they had children at home.
Yes. Yep.
And so they're doing double duty with their own children,
Mm-hmm.
much the same as other people who have jobs who are working from home
Right.
and have their children.
Yes. Yep.
So they're doing all these things, but it's all about adapt, because they're given very little leeway, and they have to work together, and they have to figure out how to do. It's a total mind flip, complete paradigm shift, complete overhaul of everything that they've been doing, because
Mm-hmm.
now they're relegated to a small screen and they have to have all these things ready for their students. And so how
Yep.
do we do all that? So they start doing all these things, learning all this technology, putting all this technology together, and they're doing it at home, and they don't have the relief, because they go through that for the little bit until the end of the year. But then during the summer, there are all these updates. The district is constantly pummeling people with updates, non-required meetings that you know that you should go to because you need to know. So
Right.
when is your downtime? When do you have time away from work, even during the summer?
Yeah. That first summer of COVID, I don't think I've ever worked more for my job and not had it been like I taught summer school, I taught ESY, I taught a whole bunch of but like this was it was just mind-boggling how much work teachers were doing over the summer and not as an extra or secondary job. Does that make sense? Like
Right.
it never stopped. And we were still trying to figure out the pandemic and that huge culture shift of at the very beginning where remember teachers were the heroes. We're like, oh, we get it. You guys, how do you do
Yeah.
this? We can't. And then it shifted to like, you guys aren't doing enough. You should be doing more. You don't care about kids. You're just
It
thinking
always
about
does
yourselves.
that.
It shifted so fast.
It does.
And
It always
meanwhile,
does
we're
that.
just like, I'm sorry, I'm working 14 hours a day and we can't figure it out. We're all freaked out about the pandemic. We don't have the technology. We've got kids. It was so hard. It was
And not only
incredibly-
that, but our district was also requiring us to contact constantly the families to make sure that they had enough food, that they had enough resources.
Yeah.
How are we going to do that? How are we going to get things into people's hands? And then having to do the trainings for how are we going to deliver those things to those families. And I'm not saying that it's wrong that they did that, because I think that that's really important that we do that.
And some of those
But
programs are still going on. Like we
yes,
have the food Act with Pride. And it's still going on, and and now
Right.
it started with just one school to serve the whole district. Now it's at almost all the schools, and they're
Mhm.
working with communities and getting donations, and it's a well-oiled machine. But I mean,
Mhm.
that is a great thing that came out of all this, is being able to make sure that we had families not go hungry. And it's also kind of startling the amount of families that need support. And
Oh,
then
yeah.
and then the flip side too is about the technology. We were able to get technology to all of our kids, which
Right.
pre-COVID we had so many who couldn't access internet or work on
Mhm.
a Chromebook and something. So there were some good little silver linings out of it, but
Oh, yeah.
when you're like
Right.
crying because you're just like, I can't stare at a screen for one more second. And I've worked so many hours and 3 kids show up and they're all dots on us. It was just mentally, I think it was just mentally exhausting. And it was lonely. That was the thing. It
Hmm.
was so lonely. And so that teachers need to be able to collaborate and, see people, and to go from such a uh people contact job. Sorry, I'm blanking out, like, right?
Right.
To
A
then just
social
go,
environment, and
yeah.
you're going into an isolated environment.
Right. And granted, lots of people were doing that. We are not the only ones who had to have that happen to us. But
Right. And
that's
then
a
you read on
podcast.
next, right.
But
And then on next door, you have these Karens who are complaining about these children who are walking down the street in their groups. Well, that's part of evolutionary social
yeah.
life. I mean, that's a necessary part of, what they need as well.
Hmm.
So, but because we've also gone into a society where we don't like free range children, because if we see children who are out walking around by themselves, there must be something wrong with the parents.
Which, like, when I grew up, like, that's what you did, right?
Yeah.
You left in the morning, be like,
Hmm.
see you at dinner, and you were gone all
Right.
day.
Oh, the other thing I wanted to bring up about the parenting is that, and not having that many, is we have more and more parents who have children's schedule. You are scheduled for a play date. You come home, you do your thing.
Oh,
You
yes.
everything is under the parent supervision, which, as we know from Peter Gray from Boston College, and reading him, is counter, it goes against everything that's in the child's best interest, because children need to be able to explore
Yeah.
and and socialize and do things.
Yeah.
I am so guilty of that myself, like, full admission, where it's hard to, well, and plus, like, downtime, I want their downtime to be like not Xbox or a screen, right? Like, I would
Hmm.
love your downtime to be reading, go
Yeah.
outside, right? But
Hmm.
then it's so hard because there's our community, our culture right now, it's just so screen oriented. So downtime becomes like, I sit in my room on a phone and I Snapchat. I'm like, that is
Hmm.
not social, dude. Like, you gotta, right? And so then the parents micromanage and they schedule stuff because they're trying to, and then it just creates this, like, they never have any downtime. I've got
Right.
kids that my son plays, and they're on like 3 different sports teams, and they're playing sports nonstop. I'm like, when do you not, it's just so
Hmm.
much, because parents want them to be, have an edge over others. And so we just constantly put them in, you know, and it's not just, it's both genders, right? It's both groups.
Hmm.
Um,
Oh yeah.
like
No, I see parents who are constantly on the go, complaining about how many games that they have to go to, how many practices they have to go to. And the first comment I say is, why don't you cut at least one of them out? No, we can't do that.
yeah,
My
yeah.
kid needs to be with their friends. That's what they do. And it's like, how is this what your kid wants? That doesn't matter.
That doesn't, they'll love it. Yeah.
So we have this self-imposed penance, I guess, for having children
I know.
that parents put themselves through. But so, okay, so we have all this isolation. All of a sudden, teachers, at least in our district, we came back in a sense in the fall, but everything was online in the fall. So now
Right.
we still have all this. We're still isolating. Things maybe got a little bit better for a short amount of time. And then, but still, we were still isolated, and the children were still isolated.
Yep.
And then we came back, and then it was, I was asked, are you willing to come in and start doing hybrid? And I said, sure.
They just
And
asked
part of,
just you, or did they ask
yeah. Well,
everybody?
they asked me. Well, all I know is that he called me
Right.
into it. I was there, and he called me into his office, and he said, Do you want to do? Do you want to be the first person to try hybrid?" I said, "Sure, why not?" So I came in and I started, and then other people started filtering in. But for I'm doing alternative ed. And so for me, it's easy because I'm working with kids by appointment.
Right.
And they know how to get in touch with me so we can still do this. We have the banner all day long. And, but a regular classroom teacher who has maybe 35, 40 kids in their class,
Mm-hmm.
and they're trying to teach language,
Oh my
they're
gosh,
trying to
right.
teach music, they're trying to teach whatever. How do you get those skills and how do you work with those students to do that? And so, and kids, of course, are going to be kids. And so they find all these things around and they start doing all these wackadoo things
Mm.
with the classes. So they have to make those less accessible. So they have to put up all these things so students aren't like jumping into classes where they don't belong and saying nasty things, et cetera, and doing that kind of bullying.
Yeah.
But here's my question. Even the year after, we're looking at doing SEL for all the kids, social emotional learning, so that because we're worried about their mental health.
Yes,
And
for good reason.
and how many teachers, because now they have to adapt and they have to take their office out of their homes now and bring them back. But how many teachers did that? And when did teachers start having actual downtime? And where are we doing the social emotional therapy
Mm-hmm.
for the teachers and the rest of the educators? There's been nothing. If there's been anything, it has been adding more to the plate, telling them that they're not doing enough, and they're psychically exhausted.
Mm-hmm.
That's what burnout is. You're overwhelmed. You've had too much. There's no downtime. There's nothing that says, let's do something. Let's figure out a remedy. Gee, you seem tired. Yeah, can we take something off our plate? Absolutely not, because now we have to add even more on there.
Well, and we have to do all the catch-up work, right? So then our work kind of
Mm-hmm.
expanded, our workload, and then
Right.
you had a lot more discrepancy between kids' skills because you had some that were engaged in it and did well. You had some that were engaged and didn't do well, and you had some that weren't engaged at all by the time they came into the building, right? We had some students who hadn't participated in like their math or their science class for almost 2 years. That's a huge gap. And I
We
think we're
love
going
our
to see
teachers.
I know we're trying so hard. But
We
it's
love
just
our teachers. We
but it's
love
just
them.
so overwhelming,
Yeah.
right? And
Yeah.
Right.
then
So
And
much.
so,
So much.
but then the students are acting out because they didn't do anything for 2 years
yeah,
and they're way behind. And so you want them to sit there and to be in their classes that they're supposed to
It
be
is
in.
hard to do.
And they're being absolutely disrespectful.
They're lighting
They're
fires in the
acting
bathroom. That's a
out.
fun
Some of
one.
the,
which is
That's a
fires in the
problem,
bathroom.
actually. I did some research. I did that sub job and they lit the bathroom on fire. And then that's one of the stories in the podcast. Well, it actually turns out that that kind of behavior was increased when they all came back because it just did. I don't know why, but yeah, that sort of thing
yeah,
increased. Yeah,
it did because
it
they're
did.
acting out. They haven't been around.
Yeah.
They've got to let out. They've got all this aggression. They've got all this energy
Yeah.
that's been pent up for a year and a
Smoking in the
half.
bathroom. Yeah.
And they're coming back and they're ripping out the soap dispensers. They're
Right.
doing all
Yes, they
kinds of
are.
there are all these stupid TikTok challenges. And
I
of
heard
Oh,
about
course
that.
they have to do the TikTok challenges. And so
Yeah.
but they're also going into the classrooms. They're being disrespectful to the teachers. Some kids are totally losing it.
Yeah.
And in many districts, in many school buildings, the teachers are supposed to deal with it. There is no support coming from their administrators.
mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Right.
And if there is anything that happens, teachers don't know about it. And I know that in our contract, if we're made to feel unsafe by a student's behavior in the classroom because of violence, we can refuse to come back to work until that student has been taken care of and that student can't be in that classroom if that's how unsafe it became. So that was always my first question. Is it possible for that student not to to no longer be in that class and to stay away from that teacher if they're doing all these flipperty do things. I mean, there have been classrooms that have been totally destroyed.
Yeah. Yes.
And nothing's been done with the student. It's, well, that we got to keep them here.
You could do it
No, you
once,
don't.
I suppose.
There are other things. There's
You know.
mental health. There's something mental health. And I think the PTSD of having that happen for the teacher needs to be dealt with as well.
Yeah.
And I will
Right.
say that in a sense, the pandemic was a traumatic affair. Yes, for the children. Yes, for the parents, but
Yeah.
also for the teachers. And nobody's willing to do anything about that. They might put in a blurb, yes, you can get some mental health help if you need it. Here's the number to call.
Right.
That's not enough. That's not being supportive.
Uh-uh.
So I think retreats.
Ooh,
I think having
like
I think
to
we talked about
Jamaica.
this, didn't we?
Oh.
Well, yeah, right. Jamaica.
Okay.
But because when you see that teacher attrition is up 52% in some districts,
Mm-hmm.
When you say,
and
just for our listeners, what do you mean by that? 52%.
people who are leaving the profession,
Got it. Yep. Just making sure we're all
they're up
listening.
over 52%. Now, there's a lot of districts who are filling those positions right and left because there are people that are coming out, but the enrollment rate is way low.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
We don't have enough substitutes.
Yeah.
I know that our district was going for high school graduates as substitutes. There's at least another state that I saw that may be doing the same thing, that if you want to be a substitute teacher, you must show proof of a high school diploma.
Mm.
You don't even have to have any college credits.
Yikes.
So, I
Talk
mean,
about
if it's
valuable.
that dire,
Yeah.
if it's that dire, instead of going that direction, why don't you go in the direction of how do we remedy the situation rather than
Right.
how do we fill the hole? Because I have a hole in my wall. Okay, so I'm going to throw in dirt from my yard and build that up, and then I'm going to put in some kind of Play-Doh on top of that. That'll take care of it.
I'm not going to actually repair it.
Dirt from my wall. I love it.
Well, it's true, actually.
I
Any
mean,
old dirt will do.
Yeah. I mean, come on, people, let's be real. If we paid over it, who's going to know the difference? We just add a little orange peel texture and yeah, we're good.
It's cost effective. You don't
Yeah,
have to
maybe,
pay for
but
it.
not
But it's
in the-
not now.
But not in the long run. Not in the long run. It's
Oh,
not.
we'll be dead by then. We'll paint over it and sell the house.
Oh my God. We'll be dead.
We will.
So,
It's
I
true.
mean-
Short-sighted.
but are we doing anything that where people feel as though they're being heard? Are we doing anything where people are feeling valued? Don't give us food.
Right.
Why is it always food? You know, okay, we have food for you. Well, yeah, but is that really healthy food that we need to have? Well, healthy food's expensive. Well, so is a person's soul. So is their psyche.
Healthy food is expensive. So is fixing the house. So let's put dirt in there and put frosting on it. You can eat that.
Right. So, I mean, why do we take away teachers' autonomy unless we're going for compliance? Why are we doing all these things unless we're going for compliance to make them feel so defeated that they will agree to anything?
Yeah.
Because so many of them feel so caught that they can't afford to leave because they're underpaid. Even if you upped a teacher's salary by $10,000 a year automatically next year, they're still probably not going to be able, that's still not going to be enough to make them feel valued. You've got to do something with the system. And there are districts that are now giving out signing bonuses for coming into the district and starting people out at a higher salary than many of their experienced teachers are getting. And so it's demoralizing.
Right. Yeah. I mean, we need to keep our veterans. And so, all of our teachers, right? And so the retention bonus, I think, is super important, not just for the new employees, but you got to value your people who've been through this and are still staying.
Instead
Well,
of
I
forcing them
appreciated my
out.
retention bonus on the day before my official retirement went through.
But you recognize, right? But we're like, yay, thanks for staying the whole time. But yeah, there's
Hmm.
just there's just so much with the burnout. We're being asked to do so much more, and then the resources that like with all the mental health and the social emotional, we need more social workers and school psychs in our high schools. We need more than one.
Yeah.
One person cannot serve the needs of 2,000 people. You need more. And until you do that, then it falls on the teachers who also need to teach and do state testing and do
Hmm.
all this other stuff. And it's just a lot. And then when the student's not doing well, then they want us to build relationships with the parents as well as the kids, which I support. But now you're calling home. When you do that, you've got to do that either during your prep or you got to do it after school. And I remember one of our co-teachers, and remember Tony in our department chair meeting one time was just like, I'm calling for hours after school because there's so many kids who are struggling and are in need, and I'm trying to do the right thing by calling home. And she was like, it's taking me hours to do
Hmm.
this,
Hmm.
And
which
there are parents that will block your numbers.
they recognize, right? And if you're only getting calls, and I get that. I actually talked to a mom who started crying because I called home about her student, blah blah blah, and you could just hear in her voice, she's like, yes. And I'm like, and I right off the bat, I'm like, I am calling with good news. She's like, really? I'm like, yes, we've been working with your student for like months, and this is in May. I'm like, the student had a really good, for him, he had a really good day. When I told the student I was going to call home, I'm like, I just wanted you to hear this phone call. And she started crying because she's like, I never get these calls. It's always about his behavior and how he's not doing blah blah blah. And I'm like,
Wow.
I know, because I've had to make those calls as well about him. But a lot, you're right. A lot of the parents are like, I just can't take anymore. I'm getting overwhelmed with emails and phone calls. I'm blocking it. And parents are overwhelmed as well
Well,
with
that's
all of
the good
this.
part about alternative ed is that there are fewer teachers, in a sense, for each student. And so
That is nice.
I
Class
tried to
size, go
send
back to that.
home emails where I remember I got a brand new kid, and within 3 weeks, I sent mom an email home. And I said, thank you so much for what you've done with your student, because here are the positive aspects of what's going on with him. And I just went right down the line. And I said, he has stuff that he has to work on, but so do we all. So just another thank you for bringing him to us.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And the next day, the kid came in and he said, you emailed my mom. And I said, yeah. And he said, you made her cry. And I said, yes. And he said, you like that? And our secretary said, yes, he likes to make people cry. And I said, well, it was for the right reasons. But there has to be something that we can do in order to help teachers mend their torn psyches. Because some of them, and I'm not talking about patchwork quilt, I'm talking about figuring out a way to actually heal them,
Hmm.
because nobody thinks that they're broken. Because teachers are very good about being professional and not bringing their work, their outside life into the classroom. Um,
Right.
and so it's this stuffing of their feelings, which we know is really unhealthy. It's their being able to put on a mask and not demonstrate that. And Philip, you know what I'm talking about. Because you
Oh yeah.
worked with many of the same students that I
Yep.
did in the
Yes, yes,
past
yes.
in
Absolutely. Yeah.
residential. And so that only lasts for a certain amount of time before there's a huge breakdown.
Eventually, yeah. There's got to be some support somewhere. Geez.
Mm-hmm.
It
Yeah.
seems like it
So
just went
what do you
away, if
think?
not turned on us. So,
So what do we do for support? How do we get, what
no.
supports do either of you think, or what kinds of, I don't want to say activities, what do you think we need to do? What would be some good actions on the part of districts in order to help teachers?
You need to hire. You need to hire more of your support services. You need to hire more learning specialists in your buildings. You need to hire more school psychs,
Yeah.
especially at, you need to have at least one per building at middle school, and you need to have at least two, if not more, at your high schools. You need to have, I feel you need more counselors, right? Counselors do a ton of work, and to only have, I mean, our building has not even 5 full time. And so they're serving like 400 kids. And that is extremely difficult to do and manage. So you need more of them. I think
Yeah.
you also need more. We've said this before, you need more alt ed or CTE classes. You
Yeah.
need to hire for that. And a lot of that's building, right? Like I would love to have culinary in our building, but we don't have the facility for it, right? So a lot of that's like bond measures and blah blah blah. Um, but I think we got to hire more of those support that helps keep our students regulated and help deal with the trauma that's going to be lasting for quite some time. And so
Yeah.
until you do that and be able to address the emotional and mental health needs of our students, it won't show well in your academic classes. A kid that's traumatized, I don't care what you do, they can't sit in the class for 90 minutes and expect to just soak in chemistry. It's just not going to happen. And if they don't have a person to go talk to or a place that they can go where they feel safe, that learning will not happen, no matter how much parents say, teach the basics. So, I mean, that to me, right off the bat, we need to have more of. And I think the other thing too is kind of like systematic. We need to kind of look at our grading practices, which is a whole nother podcast.
Mhm.
But,
I was trying to get on the grading practices. I was trying to get the team from the state to come in and talk about grading equity
yeah.
because they have a whole team around that.
Mhm.
And because of political reasons, they're not able to.
Oh, that's a bummer.
It is.
Oh.
So, because it was, what's the need? How do you see it? What's the reading? How do we go about this process? And just basic questions, but they were told no. It's for, yeah,
Oh,
they didn't want to get into it.
oh
I think
yeah.
Christy hit on it though. I think education's expensive. It just is. And
Yeah.
we're not funding it correctly. We're just not
Nope.
funding it. We're
Right.
just
Here's a
not.
question.
Yeah.
Why are we sending, and this might bend a few noses. We're sending between 1.2 to 1.5 billion dollars a month
Mhm.
to Ukraine.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
If we paid half that per month and put that into education,
Yeah.
Yeah.
wouldn't we be better off?
How amazing would that be?
Oh, yeah.
If you think about how much money that is.
we put so much more into defense than we do education. That is so very true. Yeah.
Well,
Mhm.
that's what, yeah, because why? Why?
Yeah,
No,
I mean,
I can't
I
answer
know
that.
that the money's got to come from somewhere, and I can't even pretend to
Yeah.
say where
It
it should.
shows,
But
it
it just shows
demonstrates
that the education is not the priority, unfortunately.
exactly what I was going to say. We
Yeah,
don't,
it's not.
how do we set our priorities?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Yeah, so I mean that right out of the gate is how you can, because we're asking our teachers to do so much more than teach. So if you can have more of those support systems in your building to help with our students' needs and our families'
Mhm.
needs,
Mhm.
then that hopefully takes some of that pressure and responsibilities off of the teachers so they can just focus on education and the teaching. But it's
Right.
hard where you have, I'm in classes with my co-teacher, and we have a really good system where like literally one of us is kind of addressing the behavior and the emotional needs of the kids simultaneously while the teaching is happening. And if one of us wasn't there, the whole class would shut down,
Right.
because that's just what our kids need. And so then I'm just like, oh my gosh, I feel if it's just one of you, one kid has a huge meltdown. If you're just the only teacher, now the whole class stops and learning has stopped for everybody. Whereas if you have another person in there, so that could be another thing. Can we hire more, they're called different names in different districts, but LS learning, like, assistants, right? Like it shouldn't just be for special education classes or ELD. Like there are needs across the building. Can that be? It's kind of like the equivalent of, like, elementary school always has wonderful parent volunteers that come in, and that kind of dissipates by the time you get to the high school level.
Right.
And so, can you have trained staff in there supporting in our classes in some capacity? And, some teachers are like, I don't want anyone in my room. But, like, if they're there for a specific purpose in certain classes, or I'm going to have a designated spot in my building where kids can regulate, or even just a testing center. Some buildings don't have a place for kids to go. I've been absent for X, Y, and Z. I'm coming back. I now have to I have to miss class to take a test, or I have to come after school, but I can't. And so if you had a spot where kids could go and just take their test, and it's staffed and supervised, right? And then, I mean, just little things like that would, and I know a lot of buildings have that. I'm like, thank you. That's really smart.
Or even maybe a program that's there to help students catch up to where they should be for their classes.
Yeah.
Can you have that staffed?
An academic support center or something.
Which would be fantastic. That's there during the day. So if a student's not making the mark in a special, in one of the major components of, let's say that they're doing algebra and they don't get this one piece,
right,
they need in the scaffolding.
Yeah. Yep.
They go over there until they learn it, and then they can come back and they get a little bit of what else they're missing while they're there. So that when they come back, they're not still behind the 8 ball.
Right.
They're a little further ahead.
Right. And it doesn't, if they are working after school, or they have transportation after school, or they have jobs after school, or sports, or all that stuff, you're not disrupting that, which for many students, it dysregulates them, makes it harder. But if you can have it be normalized within your day where everyone can access, it's not just like, oh, here comes this group, losers, right? Like, hey, I missed my IB exam because I was sick. And so instead of, right, because that's a whole nother level of stress for another population of students. Hey, instead of having to stay after, which I can't do, I can do it here. And it's predictable, right? You're not trying to, like, jam it into their day. And I just think those kind of things just seem so logical. And they have them at college, right? They have testing centers.
Well, yeah.
In college, it's normalized. It's just the way it is. And so, and again, but right now, for so many, it falls on the teacher to give up either their morning, their afternoon, their lunch, their prep, so that I can help the student, as opposed to, hey, here's a staffed place that they can get help on their essay, or they can take their test, or make up this lab, or whatever. And then it's not falling on, look at this, we're solving all the problems. Got it. Done.
Possibly.
We just have to get the money, like Philip said.
Yeah. But the nice thing about alternative ed is that you already have that. You should already have all that built in.
Right.
In a sense, just from the overall structure.
Right. Yeah. A lot of what I'm saying, you kind of have that in the alt ed. I shouldn't say alt ed tends to already have that built in. So we just need to have that mirrored within the gen ed setting, because a lot of students, the academic gaps right now are so huge that we're going to need to figure out a way to get kids caught up where they aren't also missing their current instruction as best we can, while recognizing that they have, like you were saying, Philip, that they have so much after school because they're so overscheduled, and you can't really change that, or they watch their little brothers and sisters and they can't stay after, that kind of stuff. So anyway, those are some of my ideas. Philip, what are your ideas? How do we solve it all? Go.
No, I think those are good ideas. I think just I was listening to you fundamentally talk about we need to pool our resources and get more resources. I mean, like you
Yeah.
said, there's so
Yes.
many wishes. I didn't have that many because I was just working in a classroom and mine was just curriculum based, but I would sure like another a rock wall. That's all. I just
Oh, a rock wall.
it didn't cost much. It was nice. I afforded it back then. I could afford another one. It would be nice. Yeah, we needed yeah, it just everyone was doing, if you think about it, you're doing 2 or 3 other jobs, really, honestly. So, as
Yeah.
a teacher, you just need to teach.
Yes.
Yeah, that would be nice if they let us.
Right?
So, with that being said, we need to say adieu. So, Mrs. Goodell, thank you very much.
You bet.
Mr. Summers, thank you.
Thank you.
And be sure to subscribe and leave us a review. And our next week's episode will be on building community. And for everybody's information, lest they don't know, it was reported this week that in his new bill, President Biden did specify that 250,000 tutors should be ready and available for districts across the country to help ease the pain of teaching. And he has some other specifications in the bill as well. I am putting the link to the article from Education Week in the show notes. So that gives us another positive step, doesn't it? Until next week. Bye-bye.